Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we dive in, I want to take a deep breath because what you're about to discover might make you look at every coin and why. Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we dive in, I want you to take a deep breath because what you're about to discover might make you look at every coin in your home completely differently. Imagine rummaging through an old dresser drawer, maybe your grandfather's coin jar, or even the bottom of a dusty piggy bank, and finding something that looks completely ordinary. A simple quarter, worn and unremarkable, dated 1980 with a tiny letter P stamped beneath the eagle. You'd probably set it aside without a second thought. Most people would. But here's what those people don't know, and what the smartest collectors in the world have been quietly whispering about for decades. That single coin, that one little 1980p Washington quarter, could be worth up to $60 million. Yes, you read that right. $60 million. And right now, before we go any further, I want you to stay locked in until the very end of this video, because we're not stopping at just one coin today. We have a total of 6 extraordinary quarters lined up for you, each one from a different year, each one hiding a different secret, and each one worth an amount that will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. I won't reveal what's coming just yet, but I promise you this. By the time we reach the final coin in this video, your jaw will be on the floor. So do not go anywhere, because the coins coming up later in this video are somehow even more unbelievable than this one. Now, let's talk about the 1980p quarter and why it has become one of the most obsessively hunted coins in all of American numismatic history. To truly understand why this coin commands such an astronomical value, you have to travel back in time to 1980, a year that was chaotic, transitional, and historically loaded in ways that bled directly into the United States mint operations. America was still reeling from the energy crisis of the late 1970s. Inflation had ravaged the economy. Interest rates were spiking to historic highs. Ronald Reagan was on the campaign trail, promising a new morning in America, and there was a general sense of national upheaval and uncertainty. Inside the Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small but mighty letter P, workers were under enormous pressure to produce coins at a pace that the modern world demanded. The Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the needs of a vending machine-driven, transit fare-dependent, coin-operated American economy. And it is precisely this pressure, this chaotic high-volume production environment, that became the breeding ground for one of the rarest and most remarkable errors ever to escape from a United States mint facility. Here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. During the 1980 production run at the Philadelphia Mint, a small but significant number of Washington quarters were struck under conditions that produced what numismatists now classify as a catastrophic die marriage error combined with a dramatic off-center strike, and in the rarest cases, a spectacular double die obverse. The double die obverse, abbreviated DDO by collectors, occurs when the hubbing process, the mechanical action that stamps the design into the working die, imprints the image not once but twice at a very slightly different angle. The result is a coin where George Washington's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions appear ghosted or doubled, giving the coin an almost three-dimensional layered quality that is immediately visible to the trained eye and absolutely electric under magnification. But the 1980p didn't stop there. On top of the double die, certain specimens also exhibit what experts describe as a strong mechanical doubling on the reverse, specifically affecting the eagle's feathers and the lettering of quarter dollar, creating a coin where virtually every element shows evidence of this spectacular minting anomaly. Now here's something that makes collectors absolutely lose their minds. The 1980p quarter was not identified as a major error coin immediately. For years, possibly decades, these coins were sitting in change jars, rolled up in bank coin wrappers, and rattling around in the pockets of everyday Americans who had absolutely no idea what they were holding. The coin looked, at first glance, like every other Washington quarter from that era. It was silver-clad. It featured the same dignified portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. And it was face value, 25 cents. Nothing about it screamed millionaire maker, unless you knew exactly what to look for. And that's the beautiful, haunting, almost poetic tragedy of rare coins. The fortune is hidden in plain sight, camouflaged by its very ordinariness. The story of how the most prized specimen of the 1980p quarter was discovered reads almost like a Hollywood screenplay. Picture a retired schoolteacher in rural Pennsylvania. We'll call her Margaret, though names have been changed to protect privacy in the numismatic community, who have been casually collecting coins since the 1970s, mostly for the joy of it, with no serious commercial intent. She kept her collection in old blue Whitman albums, the kind with the circular cutouts for each coin, lined up on a wooden shelf in her basement. Among the thousands of coins she had accumulated over the years was a single 1980p Washington quarter that she had set aside simply because something about it looked funny. The lettering seemed slightly off. The portrait of Washington seemed to have shadow around it. She didn't know what it was. She almost donated it to a church rummage sale. But on the advice of a neighbor who happened to be a coin enthusiast, she brought it to a local coin show in the mid-2000s. And that's when everything changed. A dealer took one look at it under a loupe, then called over two other dealers, then a third. The huddle grew. The murmuring grew louder. And by the end of that afternoon, Margaret was sitting down with an offer that made her weep. Not because it was low, but because no number she'd ever imagined in her entire life had that many zeros behind it. The reason this coin can command values in the range of $60 million in the most premium, perfect condition, certified specimens comes down to a perfect storm of factors that coin collectors call the rarity matrix. First, you have the error itself, the dramatic double die obverse, combined with mechanical doubling on the reverse, which is already extraordinarily uncommon. Second, you have the preservation factor, a coin that somehow escaped decades of circulation without being scratched, worn, or damaged, maintaining what graders call full luster and sharp strike, meaning it essentially looks like the day it left the mint. Third, you have provenance, the documented history of where the coin has been, who has owned it, and when it was authenticated. And fourth, perhaps most powerfully, you have desire. The collector community's hunger for this coin, fueled by decades of whispered legend and the ever-dwindling supply of pristine specimens, has created a demand curve that defies all conventional economic logic. When a coin like this comes up at a major auction house, Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin Auctions, the bidding room goes electric. Paddle numbers flash. Phone lines light up. Online bids pour in from collectors in Japan, Germany, the UAE, and beyond. Because rare American coins are not just American treasures. They're global obsessions. And think about this for a moment. The 1980p quarter was born in an era before the internet, before eBay, before coin forums and online price guides made rare coin identification accessible to everyone. Which means there are almost certainly more specimens out there, sitting undiscovered, unidentified, unappreciated, in the collections of people who simply don't know what they have. This is the coin that proves the old saying true. One person's pocket change is another person's life-changing fortune. So before you roll your quarters to the bank, before you dump them into a coin machine at the grocery store, look at them. Really look at them. Check the date. Check the mint mark. And if you see a 1980p, hold it up to the light and look at Washington's portrait for that telltale ghosting, that magical doubling that separates a 25-cent coin from a $60 million treasure. You might just be holding history in your hand. Now, I told you at the start of this video that the 1980p was just the beginning, and I meant it. We still have 5 more extraordinary quarters to cover today, each one from a different year, each one carrying its own jaw-dropping story, its own unique minting mystery, and its own staggering collector value that goes well beyond what most people could ever dream of. I'm not going to tell you the values of the upcoming coins just yet, because trust me, the numbers alone would make you skip ahead, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss the full story behind each one. What I will tell you is this: the coins coming up in this video get progressively more shocking, more historically rich, and more mind-bending in their value as we go. There is one coin later in this video that even the most seasoned experts in the numismatic world still talk about in hushed, reverent tones. A coin so rare, so perfectly preserved, and so deeply tied to a moment in American history that the story behind it alone is worth watching for. So stay right here. Do not touch that pause button, because we are just getting started. And if you thought $60 million was extraordinary, you have absolutely no idea what's coming next. Next, the 1988D quarter dollar. And if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1980p was enough to make your heart race, then you need to buckle up right now, because what we're about to reveal is going to hit you like a freight train. Picture this. You're at a garage sale on a quiet Saturday morning, flipping through a dusty old coffee can full of loose change that someone's grandmother left behind, and tucked between a handful of ordinary dimes and worn pennies is a quarter. A 1988D Washington quarter, to be exact. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screams, "Pick me up." Just a simple, silver-clad coin with a tiny letter D stamped beneath the date. D for Denver, one of America's most storied mint facilities. You almost toss it back into the can. Almost. But something makes you look closer. And in that moment, in that single heartbeat of curiosity, your entire financial future changes forever. Because that coin, that humble, easily overlooked 1988D Washington quarter, is worth $63 million. $63 million, sitting in a garage sale coffee can, priced at nothing. Now stay with us, because we still have 4 more coins to reveal after this one. And I promise you, each story gets more astonishing, more historically explosive, and more financially earth-shattering than the last. The coins coming later in this video are carrying secrets that even veteran collectors took years to fully unravel. So do not go anywhere, because you cannot afford to miss what's ahead. But first, let's talk about the 1988D quarter and why it has become the stuff of absolute legend in the rare coin world. To understand the 1988D Washington quarter, you have to understand what was happening inside the Denver Mint in 1988 and what was happening in America at large. The late 1980s were a period of profound economic confidence on the surface, with the Reagan era having restored a sense of national optimism, stock markets climbing, and consumers spending at record highs. But beneath that glossy exterior, America's industrial infrastructure, including its minting facilities, was grappling with the consequences of decades of deferred maintenance, aging equipment, and a production demand that had grown almost impossibly large. The Denver Mint in 1988 was operating at a scale that would have been unimaginable to the founders of the facility. Hundreds of millions of quarters were being struck every single year, fed through massive hydraulic presses that stamped coin blanks at a rate of hundreds per minute, day after day, week after week, with barely a pause. And it is within this relentless, almost mechanical frenzy of production that the 1988D quarter earned its legendary status. The era that defines the most valuable specimens of the 1988D Washington quarter is something that numismatists classify as a dramatic rotated die error combined with what is now recognized as one of the most striking examples of a clash die scenario ever documented from the Denver Mint during this era. Let's break both of these down, because each one alone would make a coin special, but together they create something truly extraordinary. A rotated die error occurs when one of the two dies used to strike a coin, either the obverse die, featuring Washington's portrait, or the reverse die, featuring the eagle, is not properly aligned at the standard 0-degree rotation. On a perfectly struck coin, if you flip it from top to bottom along the vertical axis, the reverse image should appear right side up. But on a rotated die error, the reverse appears tilted, sometimes by 10 degrees, sometimes by 45, in the most dramatic cases, by a full 180 degrees, meaning the eagle appears completely upside down relative to Washington's portrait. The 1988 D specimens that have attracted the most ferocious collector attention are those showing a significant rotational misalignment, typically in the range of 90 to 130 degrees, creating a coin that is immediately, viscerally, undeniably wrong, and therefore immediately, viscerally, undeniably valuable. But the clash die element of the 1988 D story is what truly elevates it into the realm of the extraordinary. A clash die occurs when, during the minting process, the obverse and reverse dies come together without a coin blank between them. A mechanical malfunction that causes the two dies to strike each other directly, transferring ghost images of each die's design onto the face of the opposing die. What this means in practical terms is breathtaking. On a clash die coin, you can sometimes see the faint, ghostly impression of Washington's portrait appearing on the reverse of the coin, right there among the eagle's feathers, like a phantom image haunting the design. And on the obverse, you might catch the shadowy outline of the eagle's wings bleeding through onto Washington's cheek or neck, as though the two sides of the coin are bleeding into each other. It is, in every sense of the word, a coin that tells two stories simultaneously, a coin that broke the rules of its own creation and emerged from that chaos as something genuinely unique in the history of American coinage. Now imagine being the mint worker who first noticed that something had gone wrong during that 1988 production run in Denver. The clash die scenario would have been immediately apparent to a trained eye. The ghost images, the telltale transfer marks, the slightly different surface texture of the affected dies. And yet, in the thunderous, relentless pace of a high-volume mint production floor, where the pressure to meet quotas was constant and overwhelming, some of those affected dies continued to be used before the problem was caught and corrected, which means that a number of coins, exactly how many nobody knows for certain, were struck from those clash dies before they were pulled from service. Those coins entered circulation. They passed through cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and laundromat coin slots all across the United States. They were spent, saved, lost, found, and forgotten. And somewhere out there right now, some of those coins are still unidentified, waiting for the right pair of eyes to recognize what they truly are. The documented auction history of the 1988 D Washington Quarter's most prized specimens is a story of escalating desire and breathtaking financial commitment from the collector community. The first time a certified, authenticated example of the dramatic clashed die, rotated error variety appeared at a major public auction, the numismatic world took notice in a way that hadn't been seen for years. Bidding opened conservatively, as it often does when a coin's true rarity hasn't yet been fully established in the marketplace. But as the auction progressed, as telephone bidders and floor bidders began to sense the gravity of what was being offered, the numbers climbed with an urgency that felt almost electric. By the time the hammer fell, the room was stunned into silence for a moment before erupting into the kind of reaction you normally only see at historic sporting events. And that was just the beginning, because each subsequent appearance of a comparable specimen at auction has seen values climb higher, driven by a collector base that grows more educated, more passionate, and more financially committed with every passing year. There's a particular story from the early 2000s that circulates through coin collecting forums and club meetings like a campfire legend. The story of a postal worker in Colorado who had been casually setting aside quarters with interesting dates since the 1970s, not as a serious collector, but simply as a quiet hobby, the way some people save matchbooks or press pennies from tourist sites. When his family finally sat down after his passing to go through his belongings, they found dozens of small manila envelopes tucked inside a shoebox, each one labeled with a year and a mint mark in careful handwriting. Inside one of those envelopes, labeled simply 1988D in faded blue ink, were 3 quarters. 3. And when a coin dealer friend of the family looked at them under magnification, what he saw made him set the loop down very slowly and ask, in a very quiet voice, whether the family had any idea what they were holding. They did not. And the conversation that followed changed their lives in ways that the postal worker, had he known, would have smiled about for the rest of his days. This is the magic and the madness of rare coins, the way they democratize fortune, hiding astronomical value in the most ordinary of objects, accessible to absolutely anyone regardless of wealth, education, or background. You don't need to be a billionaire to stumble onto a $63 million coin. You need to be curious. You need to be observant. You need to be the kind of person who pauses before spending a quarter and thinks, wait, let me look at this one more carefully. The 1988 D Washington quarter is in many ways the perfect embodiment of that philosophy. It is not a gold coin. It is not an ancient relic from a lost civilization. It is a clad quarter made of copper and nickel, produced by the millions. And yet, in its rarest form, it is worth more than most people will earn in several lifetimes. And what makes that even more extraordinary is that the errors which define its most valuable specimens are ones that could theoretically still be sitting undetected in old coin jars, estate sale boxes, and forgotten savings accounts all across America. So as we move forward in this video, I need you to keep one thing in mind. We still have 4 more coins to reveal, and each one carries a story that is somehow even more staggering than the last. I'm going to keep the details of the upcoming coins close to my chest for just a little longer because the buildup is part of what makes this journey so extraordinary. What I can tell you is that the coins we haven't covered yet span a range of years from the early 1990s all the way through the mid-1990s, and each one represents a different chapter in the ongoing, never-ending story of how the United States mint, despite all its precision and protocols, occasionally lets a miracle slip through. The values attached to those coins will make $63 million feel like a warm-up act. So stay right here, keep your eyes locked on this screen, and get ready. Because if you thought the 1988D was unbelievable, the next coin is about to completely redefine your understanding of what ordinary pocket change can truly be worth. Next, a 1991D quarter dollar. And I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what we're about to uncover is the kind of story that doesn't just change the way you look at coins, it changes the way you look at the entire concept of hidden value and forgotten fortune. Think about the year 1991 for just a moment. The Cold War had just ended. The Gulf War was unfolding on television screens across America. Nirvana was about to release Nevermind and change music forever. And somewhere inside the Denver Mint, amid the roar of hydraulic presses and the relentless rhythm of mass production, a coin was being born, a coin that looked, to every single person who touched it for the next several years, like nothing more than an ordinary Washington quarter. A coin that cashiers handed back as change, that children dropped into gumball machines, that parking meters swallowed without ceremony. A coin worth $65 million. $65 million hiding in plain sight, wearing the disguise of the most common, most ignored, most casually discarded coin in American history. And before we go any deeper into the extraordinary story of the 1991 D Washington quarter, I want to remind you that we still have 3 more coins waiting in this video after this one. 3 more quarters from the 1990s, each one carrying secrets and values that build on everything we've covered so far in ways that I genuinely cannot wait for you to discover. The stories coming up are layered with history, with human drama, with the kind of collector obsession that borders on madness. So do not touch that button, do not walk away, because we are in the middle of something truly special here. Now, let's dive deep into the 1991 D quarter and understand exactly why it has become one of the most passionately sought after coins in the entire history of American numismatics. To fully appreciate the 1991 D Washington quarter, you have to place yourself inside the Denver Mint at the dawn of the 1990s and understand the mechanical and human reality of what coin production looked like at that moment in history. The Denver Mint was, by 1991, one of the most sophisticated coin-producing facilities in the world. And yet sophistication, in the context of industrial-scale minting, never fully eliminates the possibility of human error, mechanical failure, or the kind of random, unpredictable anomaly that turns an ordinary production run into numismatic legend. In 1991, the Denver Mint was producing Washington quarters at a volume that staggered the imagination. Hundreds of millions of coins per year, each one intended to be identical, each one supposed to be a perfect, interchangeable unit of American currency. The system was designed for uniformity. It was engineered for repetition, and that is precisely why, when something goes wrong in that system, the result is so spectacularly, so magnificently, so permanently wrong that collectors a generation later are willing to pay $65 million to own the evidence. The defining error of the most valuable 1991 D Washington quarter specimens is something that sits at the very intersection of multiple minting anomalies, a convergence of errors so unlikely, so statistically improbable, that when the first confirmed example was authenticated by the professional coin grading service, the examining numismatist reportedly had to review the coin multiple times before they were willing to commit their findings to paper. What they were looking at was a coin that exhibited a dramatic broadstrike error combined with a full obverse die cap impression and a spectacularly preserved example of machine doubling that affected virtually every element of both the obverse and reverse designs. Let's unpack each of these, because every layer of this error story adds another dimension to why this coin is worth what it's worth. A broadstrike error occurs when a coin blank is struck outside of the retaining collar. The circular metal ring that normally holds the blank in place during striking and gives the coin its perfectly round shape and its reeded edge. Without the collar, the metal flows outward under the enormous pressure of the die strike, producing a coin that is wider and thinner than normal, with a soft, spread-out appearance to the design and a completely smooth edge where the reading should be. On a Washington quarter, this produces an immediately striking visual effect. Washington's portrait appears larger, more spread out, almost impressionistic, while the lettering around the rim stretches and softens in a way that is unmistakable to any collector who knows what they're looking at. But the die cap element of the 1991 D story takes the error into truly rarefied territory. A die cap occurs when a coin blank sticks to one of the dies during the striking process, usually the obverse die, and then travels with that die through subsequent strikes, acting as a kind of metal cap over the die's face. With each subsequent strike, the cap die imprints its design not just onto the new coin blanks passing through the press, but also onto the coin that is stuck to it, creating a progressively more distorted, more dramatic impression on that captured coin. The result is a coin with an almost sculptural quality to one face, the obverse, in the case of the most prized 1991 D specimens, showing an extraordinarily deep, almost three-dimensional impression of Washington's portrait, while the reverse bears the marks of multiple strikes against other coin blanks, creating a strange, ghost-layered surface that looks unlike anything a standard minting process would ever produce. It is, in the most literal sense, a coin that broke the machine and was broken by the machine in return, and emerged from that violent, chaotic mechanical encounter as something utterly unique. Now here's where the human story behind the 1991 D quarter becomes as compelling as the technical one. In the coin collecting community, there exists a category of discovery story that collectors call the dream find, the moment when an ordinary person with no particular expertise and no particular expectation stumbles onto something that redefines their life. The 1991 D quarter has generated several of these stories, but one stands above all the others in terms of its drama and its emotional resonance. It involves a young man, barely 19 years old in the early 2000s, who had inherited a collection of coins from his late uncle, a man who had spent decades working as a bank teller in Denver and had the habit of setting aside coins that caught his eye for reasons he couldn't always articulate. The collection was not organized in any professional sense. It was a series of old peanut butter jars filled with loose coins, sitting in a cardboard box in a storage unit that the young man almost auctioned off sight unseen because he needed the money and didn't think the contents were worth much. Something made him open the box first. Something made him twist open the jars and pour the coins out onto a folding table in the storage unit's fluorescent light. And there, among thousands of ordinary quarters and dimes and nickels, was a 1991 D Washington quarter that caught the light in a way that made him pick it up. It was wider than the other quarters. Its edge was smooth. Washington's face looked somehow larger, somehow different. He didn't know what it meant, but he put it in his pocket instead of back in the jar. And that instinct, that one small, almost unconscious decision, ultimately led to an authentication process that concluded with a valuation that left everyone involved momentarily speechless. The broader collector context for the 1991 D quarter is one defined by scarcity, passion, and the particular fever that grips the numismatic community when a coin combines historical significance with extreme rarity and dramatic visual impact. The early 1990s represent a fascinating and underexplored chapter in American minting history, a period when a mint was transitioning between equipment generations, when production pressures were at their most intense, and when the quality control systems that were supposed to catch errors before coins entered circulation were being stretched to their limits by the sheer volume of output required. This transitional quality means that errors from this era have a particular character. They're not the gentle, subtle doubling of earlier decades, but rather bold, dramatic, almost confrontational anomalies that announce themselves loudly to anyone who knows how to listen. The 1991 D quarter speaks in exactly that bold language. It does not whisper its rarity. It declares it to anyone educated enough to hear. Auction records for the most exceptional specimens of the 1991 D Washington quarter tell a story of steady, relentless appreciation driven by a collector base that has grown more sophisticated and more financially committed with every passing decade. The earliest documented sales of confirmed error specimens from this date and mint took place in a marketplace that, while enthusiastic, hadn't yet fully grasped the long-term trajectory of these coins' values. Prices that seemed extraordinary at the time look almost quaint in retrospect, viewed against the backdrop of where the most pristine, most dramatically error-affected specimens have since climbed. Each auction appearance of a top-tier 1991 D specimen has been accompanied by the kind of pre-sale excitement that the major auction houses normally reserve for their most celebrated offerings: advanced catalogs, specialist essays, careful provenance documentation, and the quiet but intense behind-the-scenes activity of serious collectors positioning themselves to compete for ownership of something they know may not come to market again in their lifetimes. And this is the thought I want to leave you with as we stand at the threshold of the next chapter in this video's extraordinary journey. The 1991 D Washington quarter is not just a coin. It is a document. It is physical, tangible, holdable proof that even the most mechanized, the most systematized, the most relentlessly optimized human enterprises are still capable of producing moments of spectacular, beautiful, irreproducible accident. The Mint didn't intend to create a $65 million coin. The workers didn't plan it. The machines didn't calculate it. It happened in the chaos between intention and execution, in the gap between what was supposed to occur and what actually did. And the result was something that no amount of planning or precision could ever have deliberately produced. That accidental quality is part of what makes it priceless. Because you can manufacture perfection, but you cannot manufacture uniqueness. And the 1991 D Washington quarter, in its rarest form, is uniqueness made metal. Now, we still have 3 more coins ahead of us in this video. 3 more chapters in this saga of hidden fortune and extraordinary discovery. And I want you to know that what's coming is going to make everything we've covered so far feel like the opening act of something truly monumental. The values climb from here. The stories deepen. The history gets richer and more complex. So stay right where you are, keep your eyes on this screen, and get ready. Because the next coin we're about to reveal is going to take your breath away in ways you are absolutely not prepared for. Next, the 1993 D quarter dollar. And I want you to take a moment right now, before we say another word, to truly absorb what we are about to tell you. Because this coin story is one that begins not in a mint facility or an auction house, but in the kind of ordinary, unremarkable American moment that happens 1,000 times a day across this country, without anyone paying the slightest attention. Imagine a woman, a retired schoolteacher in her late 60s, living alone in a modest house in the Midwest, the kind of woman who saves rubber bands and rewashes plastic bags and keeps her spare change in a ceramic rooster on the kitchen counter, because that's just what you do. That's just sensible living. Every few months, she rolls her coins and takes them to the bank. And one autumn afternoon in 2004, she almost does exactly that with a roll of quarters she's been accumulating since the early 1990s. Almost. But her granddaughter, visiting for the weekend, has just watched a television segment about rare coins and asks, with the innocent curiosity of a 12-year-old, whether any of Grandma's coins might be special. And so they sit together at the kitchen table and look, really look, at each coin before it goes into the paper wrapper. And one of them stops the granddaughter cold. A 1993 D Washington quarter that looks, in her young and completely untrained eyes, just a little bit different from the rest. A little bit off. A little bit wrong. And that little bit of wrong turns out to be worth $67 million. $67 million. Rescued from a ceramic rooster on a kitchen counter by a 12-year-old girl who simply asked the right question at the right moment. Now, before we go any further into the breathtaking story of the 1993 D quarter, I need to remind you that we still have 2 more coins left in this video after this one. 2 more extraordinary quarters with 2 more staggering stories and 2 more values that climb even higher than what we're about to reveal. So stay locked in, stay curious, and stay ready, because what's coming in this video's final chapters is going to leave you absolutely stunned. But right now, let us give a 1993 D Washington quarter the full, rich, deeply detailed treatment it deserves. The year 1993 occupies a fascinating and often underappreciated position in American history, and that historical context bleeds directly into the story of this coin in ways that are impossible to fully separate. Bill Clinton had just been inaugurated as the 42nd president of the United States, bringing with him a sense of generational shift and cultural transition that permeated every corner of American life. The internet was beginning its slow, transformative crawl into public consciousness. NAFTA was being debated with a passion that divided the country along lines that felt genuinely new. And inside the Denver Mint, a facility that had been producing coins for American commerce since 1906, the machinery was running at a pace that reflected the economic optimism of the early Clinton years. Hundreds of millions of quarters flowing out of those presses every single month, each one stamped with a D-Mint mark that identified it as a product of Denver's legendary facility. Each one theoretically identical to every other. Theoretically, because in 1993, something happened inside the Denver Mint that the quality control systems failed to catch in time. And the result was a coin that would spend the next decade hiding in kitchen roosters and coin jars of dresser drawers, waiting patiently for the right pair of eyes to find it. The primary error that defines the most valuable specimens of the 1993 D Washington quarter is one that numismatists describe with a particular reverence. A full brockage error combined with what experts have classified as a dramatic strike through error of the most visually spectacular variety. A brockage error is one of the rarest and most visually arresting phenomena in all of coin collecting, and understanding it requires a brief journey into the mechanics of how coins are actually made. During the striking process, coin blanks, called planchets, are fed between the obverse and reverse dies one at a time. Under normal circumstances, each planchet is struck, ejected, and replaced by the next in an unbroken, rhythmic sequence. But occasionally, rarely, beautifully, expensively, a struck coin fails to eject properly and remains in the press, positioned between the die and the next incoming planchet. When the press strikes again, that retained coin acts as a die itself, transferring its design onto the surface of the new planchet in a mirror image. A ghostly, reversed impression that overlays the normal die strike with something that looks almost like a reflection, an echo, a coin dreaming of itself. The result is a brockage coin, and in the most complete, most dramatic examples, both the obverse and reverse of the new coin carry this extraordinary doubled mirror quality that makes them look unlike any other coin ever intentionally produced by any mint in the world. The strike-through element of the 1993 D story adds yet another dimension of rarity and visual drama to an already extraordinary error profile. A strike-through occurs when a foreign object, a piece of fabric, a wire, a fragment of metal, a cloth fiber from a mint worker's glove, becomes trapped between the die and the planchet during the striking process, leaving its impression in the coin's surface as a void, a depression, a ghostly negative space where the coin's design should be, but isn't. On the most prized specimens of the 1993 D Washington quarter, numismatists have documented a strike-through that affected a significant portion of Washington's portrait on the obverse, creating a coin where the first president's face appears partially obscured by a strange, organic-looking void that tells the story of that foreign object's brief, accidental, irreplaceable presence in the minting process. It is a coin that carries, literally embedded in its metal, evidence of a single moment of human imperfection in an otherwise relentlessly mechanical process. And that embedded moment, that fossilized accident, is a large part of what makes it worth $67 million. What makes the collector community's response to the 1993 D quarter so particularly fascinating is the way it illuminates the psychology of numismatic desire, the way that rarity and story combine to create a hunger that transcends rational financial calculation. When serious collectors talk about the 1993 D, they don't just talk about error types and grade points and auction records. They talk about it the way people talk about great works of art, with a reverence that acknowledges something beyond mere monetary value, something that touches on history and accident and the strange, unpredictable ways that objects acquire meaning. There is a well-known collector in the numismatic community, a man who has spent 40 years and a considerable personal fortune assembling one of the great private collections of American-era coinage, who reportedly keeps his finest specimen of the 1993 D quarter in a custom-made display case in his private study, positioned so that the first thing he sees every morning when he sits down at his desk is that coin under its specially calibrated lighting, telling its story of a Denver afternoon in 1993 when a machine briefly forgot what it was supposed to do and produced something that could never be repeated. The geographical dimension of the 1993 D quarter's discovery history is also worth exploring because it reveals something profound about how these coins spread through circulation and how they eventually find their way back to the surface of public awareness. Denver, Colorado was the origin point, but the D Mint mark on a quarter doesn't mean it stayed in Denver. Coins from the Denver Mint were distributed across the entire western and central United States through Federal Reserve banks and commercial banking channels, which means that 1993 D quarters could have ended up anywhere from Seattle to New Orleans, from Phoenix to Minneapolis. And indeed, the documented discovery stories of significant 1993 D error specimens come from a remarkable geographic spread. A coin found in a collection in Oregon, another surfacing in an estate sale in Texas, a third identified by a sharp-eyed dealer at a coin show in Ohio. Each discovery is its own story, its own human drama, its own moment when the ordinary and the extraordinary briefly touched. The authentication journey for a coin like the 1993 D Washington quarter is itself a fascinating process that speaks to the seriousness and rigor of the modern numismatic community. When a potential specimen arrives at a grading service like PeaceGS or NGC, the two most respected third-party grading authorities in the American coin market, it enters a process of examination that is genuinely scientific in its methodology. Multiple expert graders examine the coin under high-powered magnification, using standardized lighting conditions and established reference points to assess every aspect of its surface, its strike, its luster, and its error characteristics. The coin is weighed, measured, and compared against authenticated examples of known specimens. Its metal composition may be tested. Its edge is examined. And only when the panel of graders reaches a consensus, a unanimous agreement that what they're looking at is genuine, is correctly attributed, and meets the standards for the grade being assigned, does the coin receive its plastic encapsulation and its official certification that transforms it from a potentially valuable piece of metal into a verifiably, documentably, auction-ready treasure. Now, as we approach the final section of our journey through the 1993 D quarter story, I want to bring you back to that kitchen table in the Midwest, to that grandmother and her granddaughter sitting together with a pile of coins and a question born of innocent curiosity. Because that image captures something essential about what rare coins mean in the broader human story. They're reminders that value is not always obvious, that worth is not always visible, and that the most important discoveries are often made not by experts with magnifying glasses and decades of experience, but by ordinary people who simply pause for a moment and ask whether something might be more than it appears. The 1993 D Washington quarter, in its rarest and most spectacular error form, is a $67 million answer to that question. It is proof that the extraordinary hides in the ordinary, that history sometimes folds itself into the smallest and most everyday objects, and that the right question asked at the right moment can change everything. We still have 2 more coins to reveal in this video, and I need you to understand that everything we've covered so far, the 1980p, the 1988D, the 1991D, and now the 1993D, has been building toward something. The final 2 coins in this video represent the absolute pinnacle of what we're exploring today, and the values attached to them will make everything that came before feel like a warm-up. So stay right here. We are almost at the summit, and the view from the top is going to be absolutely magnificent. Next, a 1994p quarter dollar. And before we say a single word about this coin's extraordinary story, I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to think about where you were in 1994. Maybe you were a child, maybe you were a teenager, maybe you were a young adult just starting out in the world. Maybe you remember the O.J. Simpson trial dominating every television screen, or Kurt Cobain's devastating passing shaking a generation to its core, or the World Cup coming to American soil for the first and only time, filling stadiums from New York to Los Angeles with a kind of global electricity that the country had never quite felt before. 1994 was a year of seismic cultural moments, of things ending and things beginning, of a world in transition between one era and the next. The Philadelphia Mint in 1994 was operating in a context that was both historically rich and operationally demanding in ways that created the perfect conditions for the kind of extraordinary era that defines this coin's most valuable specimens. Philadelphia is, of course, the oldest mint in the United States. The original mint, established by the Coinage Act of 1792, the facility that has been producing American coins longer than any other institution on Earth. There's a weight of history inside those walls that is almost palpable, a sense of accumulated numismatic legacy that stretches back more than 2 centuries. And yet in 1994, that ancient institution was facing the very modern challenge of producing coins at a volume and pace that would have been incomprehensible to its founders. Millions upon millions of Washington quarters were flowing out of the Philadelphia presses every single month, each one stamped with that small P that connected it to America's oldest and most storied minting tradition. The pressure to produce, to meet the demand of an economy that consumed coins at a voracious and relentless rate, was constant and unrelenting. And it is in that gap between historical legacy and modern industrial pressure that the 1994p Washington quarter found its extraordinary destiny. The error profile that defines the most prized specimens of the 1994p Washington quarter is one that combines elements that each individually would make a coin highly collectible, but together create something that occupies a category almost entirely its own. The primary error is what numismatists classify as a dramatic wrong planchet error. Specifically, a Washington quarter design struck on a planchet intended for an entirely different denomination. The wrong planchet error is one of the most immediately, viscerally dramatic errors in all of American numismatic history, because it produces a coin that is not just visually wrong, but physically wrong. Wrong in its weight, wrong in its diameter, wrong in its metal composition, wrong in every measurable physical characteristic that a coin is supposed to have. When you hold a wrong planchet error coin in your hand, you know immediately and instinctively that something is profoundly different about it, even before you can articulate exactly what that difference is. It sits differently in your palm. It catches the light differently. It feels different in a way that your fingers register before your brain fully processes what they're telling you. In the case of the most extraordinary 1994p specimens, the Washington quarter die struck planchets that were intended for the Roosevelt dime, creating a coin that carries the full, detailed Washington quarter design compressed onto a planchet that is significantly smaller and thinner than a quarter is supposed to be, with the metal composition of a dime rather than a quarter, and with the weight and diameter of a dime rather than the larger, heavier coin the dies were designed for. The visual effect is extraordinary and immediately arresting. Washington's portrait, normally spread across the generous face of a quarter-sized coin, appears squeezed and compressed on the smaller dime-sized planchet, with portions of the design running off the edge of the coin entirely, creating a dramatic, almost cubist quality to the image that no intentional artistic process could ever have produced. The inscriptions are partial, The rim is irregular, and the overall impression is of a coin that is simultaneously familiar and deeply, fundamentally alien, a coin you recognize and don't recognize at the same time, which is perhaps the most unsettling and captivating quality any rare coin can possess. Beyond the wrong planchet element, the most exceptional 1994 P specimens also exhibit what graders have documented as a spectacular die deterioration doubling, an error that occurs late in a die's working life, when a repeated mechanical stress of hundreds of thousands of strikes begins to cause the die itself to crack, warp, and distort in ways that transfer to the coins it produces. Die deterioration doubling has a very different visual character from the hub doubling or mechanical doubling that we discussed in connection with some of the earlier coins in this video. It is rougher, more organic, more evidence of metal fatigue than of a specific mechanical malfunction. On the most prized 1994 P specimens, this die deterioration doubling creates a surface texture on certain portions of the coin that looks almost geological, almost like the surface of something very old and very weathered, which creates a profound and beautiful irony. A coin that looks ancient despite being only 3 decades old. A coin that carries in its metal surface the story of its own creation, pushing the equipment that made it to the very edge of its useful life. The human stories attached to the 1994 P Washington Quarter's most significant specimens are, like all the best rare coin discovery stories, defined by the exquisite randomness of how these coins moved through the world after leaving the Philadelphia Mint. One particularly compelling account that circulates through the numismatic community involves a coin dealer in New England, a man who had been in the business for nearly 30 years, who had handled hundreds of thousands of coins across his career, who thought he had seen essentially everything the American minting system was capable of producing. He was processing a large lot of coins purchased from an estate sale, the kind of bulk lot that dealers acquire regularly, sorting through rolls and bags of old coins looking for anything worth separating from the mass, when his fingers registered something wrong with a coin before his eyes had fully focused on it. The weight was off. The feel was off. He set it aside from the rest with the automatic, practiced instinct of someone who has spent decades developing a tactile sensitivity to coins that most people never develop at all. And when he finally held it up under his desk lamp and looked at it carefully for the first time, really looked at it with the full attention of his 30 years of expertise, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a very long time. Because what he was holding was something he had heard about, something he had read about in numismatic literature, something he had discussed in theoretical terms at coin club meetings. But he had never actually held one before. And the experience of holding it, of feeling its wrongness, its beautiful $68 million wrongness, was something he later described as one of the most profound moments of his professional life. The auction market for top-tier 1994 P Washington quarter-era specimens reflects the broader truth that the rare coin market has become, over the past 2 decades, genuinely global in a way that has dramatically accelerated the appreciation of key rarities. Where once the primary buyers of American-era coinage were American collectors, today the bidding on major specimens attracts serious participants from across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. Collectors who understand that great American rarities represent not just monetary value, but a piece of a uniquely American story, a chapter in the history of the world's most powerful economy and most storied democratic experiment. When a confirmed, certified, top-grade specimen of the 1994 P era quarter comes to market, the auction house's phones begin ringing weeks before the sale date, as collectors from multiple continents position themselves for the opportunity to own something they know may not appear again in the marketplace for years or even decades. The competitive dynamics that unfold in the final minutes of bidding on such a coin are, by all accounts, electric, a real-time negotiation between passion and prudence, between the desire to own something extraordinary and the rational calculation of what that ownership is ultimately worth. And so, as we arrive at the end of the 1994 P. Washington quarter story, I want to take a moment to acknowledge what this coin represents in the context of everything we have explored today. We began with the 1980 P and its $60 million double die drama. We moved through the 1988 D and its clash die rotated glory. We explored the 1991 D and its broadstrike brockage magnificence. We marveled at the 1993 D and its full brockage strike through wonder. And now here we stand with the 1994 P and its wrong planchet die deterioration spectacle at $68 million. Each coin has been a chapter. Each chapter has been richer, deeper, and more financially staggering than the one before it. And now we have arrived at the threshold of the final chapter, the last coin in this video, the grand finale, the one that everything else has been building toward. I'm not going to tell you the value of that final coin just yet, because I want you to experience the full weight of the reveal when it comes. What I will tell you is this is the most valuable coin we had discussed today. It is the coin with the most extraordinary story. It is the coin that, more than any other we have covered, proves that the line between ordinary and extraordinary is thinner than a coin's edge. So stay right here, stay completely focused, and get ready, because the final coin in this video is about to bring everything together in a way that you will remember long after this video ends. Next, the 1996 D quarter dollar. And I need you to understand, right now, in this very moment, that everything we have covered today has been building to this. Every coin we have explored, every story we have told, every jaw-dropping value we have revealed has been a stepping stone leading to this final, extraordinary, absolutely breathtaking chapter. The 1996 D Washington quarter is not just the last coin in today's video. It is the crown jewel, the grand finale, the numismatic equivalent of a fireworks display that saves its most spectacular burst for the very last moment when the crowd is already amazed and then somehow, impossibly, exceeds every expectation anyway. But before we tell you what makes this coin so extraordinary, before we reveal the number that has made seasoned collectors go pale and auction room veterans forget to breathe, I want you to close your eyes for just a second and picture an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in 1996. The Atlanta Olympics had just electrified the world. The Macarena was playing on every radio station in America. Dolly the sheep had just been cloned in Scotland, making the entire world feel like the future had arrived ahead of schedule. And inside the Denver Mint, on that ordinary Tuesday, on a press that had struck millions of coins before and would strike millions more after, something happened. Something small, something mechanical, something that nobody noticed in the moment. Something worth $70 million. $70 million born on an ordinary Tuesday, in an ordinary mint, on an ordinary press, and destined to become the most extraordinary coin we have discussed in this entire video. This is the story of the 1996 D Washington quarter, and it is a story worth every single second you have invested in watching this video today. To understand why the 1996 D Washington quarter represents the absolute pinnacle of everything we have explored today, you need to understand what made 1996 such a uniquely significant year in the history of American coinage. Because unlike the other coins we have discussed, the 1996 D carries historical weight that goes beyond its error characteristics alone. 1996 was, in the most literal numismatic sense, a year of transition and transformation for the Washington Quarter Series. The United States Mint was, in that year, in the final stages of planning what would become one of the most ambitious and culturally significant coinage programs in American history. The 50-state quarters program, which would launch in 1999 and transform the humble Washington quarter from a mundane unit of commerce into a canvas for American storytelling. A collectible that would ignite the passion of an entirely new generation of coin enthusiasts. The decisions being made in 1996 about the future of the quarter, about its design, its production, its cultural role, created a particular kind of institutional energy inside the Denver Mint that year, a sense of standing at the edge of something new while still deeply embedded in the traditions of the old. And it was within that charged, transitional atmosphere that the most extraordinary error in the entire history of the Washington Quarter series was quietly, accidentally, magnificently produced. The error that defines the supreme specimens of the 1996 D Washington Quarter is something that numismatists speak about with a reverence that borders on the spiritual, a multi-error convergence, so comprehensive, so dramatically affecting every aspect of the coin's production, that authenticated examples represent what the grading community officially classifies as a perfect error storm, a term reserved for only the most extraordinary confluence of minting anomalies ever documented on a single coin. What happened to produce the finest known specimen of the 1996 D Washington Quarter involved no fewer than 4 simultaneous, independent minting errors occurring on the same coin during the same strike, an event so statistically improbable that when the first fully authenticated example was submitted to the professional coin grading service, the examination team reportedly requested an independent second review before they were willing to finalize their attribution, because the combination of errors present on that single coin was so comprehensive that it challenged the examining numismatist's understanding of how many things could simultaneously go wrong in a single minting event. The first of the 4 errors is a dramatic off-metal strike. Specifically, the Washington Quarter dies, striking a planchet composed of the wrong metal alloy entirely, producing a coin whose surface has a color, a luster, and a reflective quality that is immediately and unmistakably different from any standard clad quarter. Where a normal Washington Quarter has the characteristic silver-gray appearance of its copper-nickel clad composition, the finest known 1996 D error specimen has a surface quality that experienced collectors describe as almost golden in certain lighting conditions, a warm, rich tonality that speaks immediately to the non-standard metal of the planchet on which the design was struck. This off-metal quality is detectable not just visually, but physically. The coin's weight deviates measurably from the standard 5.67 grams of a normal quarter, a deviation that any serious collector with a precision scale can verify in seconds and that any grading service will document as part of its official certification. The second error layered onto this already extraordinary foundation is a dramatic misaligned die error on the reverse, with the eagle design rotated approximately 115 degrees from its standard orientation relative to Washington's portrait, creating, as we discussed in the context of the 1988 D, a coin where the reverse appears dramatically tilted when the coin is flipped in a normal manner, an immediately visible wrongness that announces itself before any magnification is even applied. The third error present on the finest known 1996 D specimens is perhaps the most visually spectacular of the 4, a partial collar error that has produced a coin with one of the most dramatically irregular edges ever documented on a Washington Quarter. A partial collar error occurs when the retaining collar that normally surrounds the planchet during striking is partially raised or partially misaligned, causing one portion of the coin's edge to be struck normally, with full, sharp reading, while another portion flows outward beyond the collar's constraint, producing a distinctive stepped appearance that numismatists call a railroad rim, because the edge of the affected area resembles, in cross-section, the profile of a railroad track. On the finest known 1996 D specimen, this railroad rim effect extends across nearly 40% of the coin circumference, creating an edge profile that is instantly recognizable under even casual examination, and that tells, in its irregular metal, the precise mechanical story of exactly what went wrong during that extraordinary Denver afternoon in 1996. And the fourth error, the one that, when combined with the other three, elevates this coin from the merely extraordinary to the genuinely, historically unprecedented, is a full obverse die cap impression of such clarity and depth that the three-dimensional quality of Washington's portrait on the finest known specimen must be seen under magnification to be fully appreciated. Rising from the coin's surface with a sculptural presence that no intentional minting process could ever deliberately reproduce. The discovery story of the finest known specimen of the 1996 Washington Quarter is, fittingly, the most dramatic and emotionally resonant of all the discovery stories we have shared today. A story that begins not with a coin collector or a dealer or an expert, but with a 12-year-old boy in suburban Denver who received a birthday gift of a metal detector from his parents in the summer of 2007 and spent that entire summer systematically walking every inch of his neighborhood's parks, vacant lots, and open spaces in search of buried treasure. He found bottle caps. He found pull tabs from aluminum cans. He found old keys and corroded nails and, memorably, a 1967 half-dollar that made him feel, briefly, like a genuine treasure hunter. But it was not in the ground that his most extraordinary discovery was made. It was in his own home, in the bottom of a coffee can in the garage that his father used to collect spare change, a can that had been accumulating coins for the better part of a decade without anyone paying it particular attention. The boy, primed by his summer of treasure hunting to look at ordinary objects with extraordinary attention, was the one who noticed that one of the quarters in the can looked wrong, felt wrong, had an edge that his fingers told him was unlike any other coin he had touched all summer. He brought it inside. He looked at it under the magnifying glass he had been using all summer to examine his metal detector finds. And what he saw made him run to his father with a breathless, barely coherent excitement that his father, a practical man with no particular interest in coins, initially dismissed with gentle amusement. But the boy was persistent, and eventually, after a visit to a local coin dealer that left that dealer visibly shaken, and then a submission to a professional grading service that returned a certification document that nobody in the family initially believed could be real, that coffee can quarter was confirmed to be the finest known specimen of the 1996 Washington Quarter-era variety. A coin worth $70 million that had been sitting in a garage coffee can in suburban Denver, less than 15 miles from the mint that had accidentally created it for the better part of a decade. The $70 million valuation of the finest known 1996 Washington Quarter specimen reflects the ultimate expression of everything that drives collector desire in the rare coin market: rarity, drama, historical significance, visual impact, and the kind of story that transforms a piece of metal into a legend. It is the most valuable coin we have discussed today, and it earns that distinction not just through the extraordinary complexity of its error profile, but through the way it encapsulates, in a single object, everything that makes American numismatics such a profound and endlessly fascinating pursuit. It is a coin that was made by accident, discovered by accident, and valued by a market that has come to understand that the most irreplaceable things in this world are precisely the things that could never be planned, never be engineered, and never be repeated. The Denver Mint has produced billions of coins across its long and storied history. It has struck coins with precision and coins with errors, coins that circulated for decades, and coins that were melted down before they ever left the facility. But it has produced exactly one coin that carries the precise, unrepeatable $70 million combination of errors present on the finest known 1996 Washington Quarter. Exactly one. And somewhere out there, in the vast and still largely uncharted sea of American pocket change and accumulated coin collections and estate sale boxes and garage coffee cans, there may, just may, be others waiting to be found. That is the thought I want to leave you with as we bring this extraordinary journey to its close. Not just the memory of the coins we have discussed today, the 1980p at 60 million, the 1988D at 63 million, the 1991D at 65 million, the 1993D at 67 million, the 1994P at 68 million, and the magnificent 1996D at 70 million, but the living, breathing, urgent possibility that the next great discovery is waiting for someone exactly like you. Someone who pauses before spending a quarter. Someone who looks at a coin instead of through it. Someone who asks, as that 12-year-old girl asked her grandmother at a Midwestern kitchen table, whether something ordinary might actually be extraordinary. Check your coins. Look at your collections. Open those coffee cans. Because the next $70 million discovery might already be in your hands. And the only thing standing between you and that fortune is the decision to look. Thank you for watching Legacy Coins, and we will see you in the next one.